on our program that we have in front of you, our keynote speaker is Congressman Khanna, and we're excited about that. But he also did us a great favor and brought a dear friend of his, another congressman, Congressman Jonathan Jackson, who is no stranger to South Carolina because he is the son of South Carolina, civil rights leader Jesse Jackson. So we've been triple blessed this morning. So if you came to this conference, you are getting triple for your dollar. So I do want to introduce and bring up Congressman Jonathan Jackson, who wants to speak a little bit about things that are going on Capitol Hill, all the progress the administration's making. And of course, he can talk a little bit about South Carolina because he's no stranger. You can come up, sir. So I introduce to you Congressman Jonathan Jackson.
Let's give our chairwoman, Ms. Spain, a loving round of applause. We wouldn't be here without her leadership. I bring you greetings on behalf of my father, Reverend Jesse Jackson. This is home. South Carolina is no stranger to me. We spent so many of our summers here in the Greenville area. So from Palmetto all the way to the Piedmont region, we love some South Carolina. I'd like to give a very special thank you to my dear friend, Congressman Khanna. It was a year ago I started running, a year and a half ago, and when I needed a friend, needed some help, needed some information and some guidance, he made himself available. Let me tell you, if you want to figure out who your friends are, I encourage everyone to run for office. Thank you, Congressman Khanna, a friend of mine. People have asked me, being a freshman, what is it like being in the Congress? Well, it's come down to three issues. On the first day, it's a true honor, a privilege, a pleasure to be in the history, to be around so many people that can make the difference, to have the opportunity to represent people, to have their voice and to cast the vote for the things that they believe in. So that day is truly amazing. On another day, it's an idea marketplace where you have to compete for time and attention and try to win over coalitions to get your idea to the marketplace. And on the third day, which could be a bad day, it's like you've transferred into a bad high school. You're like, how did I get here and what are these people doing? Where we've gone through 2 speakers in 1 year, we've had 19 rounds of votes simply determine the majority party can have its own leadership. Our party leadership is unified, it's clear, it's strong. So give yourself a round of applause for Democratic leadership in the House, the adults that are in the room. What do we see on the horizon? Our nation is drifting very closely towards war on multiple fronts. Truly, we have to pray for our leaders, and we ask for calmer heads to prevail. I don't want to see anyone's child being greeted to come back into Andrews Air Force Base in a bag. I don't want to see it. I am against war on all fronts. Of course, we have to have a strong defense, but we also have to have strong diplomacy. We have almost 26 embassies that the Senate has held up, not confirming our ambassadors. As we speak right now, there has not been an ambassador confirmed from the United States to Israel. There has not been an ambassador confirmed from the United States to Egypt. So I want us to exhaust all means of our diplomacy. I don't want to see another child coming from the Citadel, coming from West Point. Those children have also volunteered to go into our military. I don't think older people should be putting young people on the front line. I want to break that system and that tyranny up. Our children deserve to have a peaceful future. My youngest child is 22 years of age. Ever since he's been born, our nation's been at war. I know there is a time, Ecclesiastic teaches us, a time for everything, but let's give peace a chance. This evening, we're going to go to the Piedmont region of the state to talk at the NAACP dinner, and I'll be talking about blessed are the peacemakers, not the peacekeepers, our scriptures teaches us, the peacemakers. Someone has to be willing to reconcile both sides. Someone has to be willing to give peace a chance, and that's the tradition. That's the values that we have, and those are the values we will continue to uphold. Under the Biden-Harris administration, there has been so many good things that have happened. Without South Carolina, there would be no Joe Biden. The choice is clear. You all had the good sense, the temperament, you could see the long game, you saw the future. You voted for the nation's best interest in putting Joe Biden over Donald Trump into the White House. I don't want to upset your food and your meal, but can you imagine if Donald Trump were in the White House today? Okay, now let's speed up so we don't have to get some Tums and some Alka-Seltzer and some Pepto-Bismol. It's enough to give you a heartache. And to think this man has now appointed his own self-elected person, Mr. Johnson, to be the Speaker of the House. And you know the order of succession for the presidency. After the president is the vice president and then the Speaker of the House. Mr. Donald J. Trump has a person 2 heartbeats away from being president of the United States of America. So why do we need South Carolina first? We need your mentality. We need your temperament. We need your patience and your perseverance. We've got to make sure our people come out and vote. They know what they're voting for. They know what's at stake. South Carolina is going forward ever, backwards never. South Carolina has turned around and it is moving forward at jet-like speed. We are so proud of the Charleston of today. We know the Charleston of yesteryear, but we are proud of the Charleston today. And we're even more excited about the Charleston of the future. This is now a composite city, a composite state. The nation is moving in here. Industry is moving in here. Tourism is here. We can also reconcile our history with our future. That's why I am so glad to be back in Charleston, South Carolina. Am I going to introduce my friend or are you going to introduce him? But one last word I want to give about my dear friend, Khanna, an author, a scholar, a person that's cerebral, and he's taken the time to go through every corner of the state of South Carolina. He wants to understand the state. He understands the culture. He understands the people. He's building the relationships. I've come down here to be with my friend because I need to spend some more time. You all have graced the nation by accepting the first state to be the presidential nomination. Oh my God, how big is that? Who would have thought? After 234 years. Now I'm very excited for Iowa. They've had their chance and they've had their time. I'm very happy for New Hampshire. They've had their chance and they've had their time. But if you really want to understand America, you've got to come to South Carolina. Khanna is a man who is built for such a time as this. I'm honored to be here. You all have made it possible. Thank you for emerging. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman Spain, for leading the nation. You all have outstanding leadership. Together, we will continue the Biden-Harris legacy, keep America strong, and make it better. God bless you.
I've got some more I could say, but I mean, wow, after that, you might as well come on up. But I will just put a finer point on what the congressman said about Congressman Khanna. He has been traveling this state, coming in and doing so many things. I'm sure he's going to tell you guys about. He's the congressman that represents Silicon Valley. So he is doing stuff in tech in HBCUs. My son is attends the HBCU where he had a program at. So he's done a lot of things and has a lot of things that on the horizon. So I will introduce to you Congressman Khanna.
Well, the only mistake I made asking Jonathan to come and speak is having him speak before me. Oratory obviously runs in his family, but let me tell you 2 things about Jonathan before talking about the chair. Jonathan is leading the civil rights movement in Congress, and I'll give you a concrete example. There is no Africa caucus in the entire Congress after all these years. I mean, I was at the International African American Museum, and you raise, a brilliant museum. And so Jonathan comes a few months in and he says, why don't I start an Africa caucus? I said, Jonathan, there's got to be one. Turns out there's none. He had the vision, he's going to have a bipartisan Africa caucus, finally, after over 200 years. And he's leading the issue of voting rights. The idea that people are disenfranchised still in this country after being incarcerated. They don't have their voting rights returned in at least 9 states around America. Over 5 million people are not enfranchised. Jonathan is leading the efforts to have a bill at the federal level to restore franchise for all Americans. That's Jonathan Jackson. So thank you, Jonathan, for your leadership and your vision. You're going to be seeing him and hearing him for many years to come. And Crystal, thank you for what you have done. I mean, I think Jonathan would agree with me. You're not just a leader for South Carolina, you're a leader for the country. People have noticed what you are doing here in this state. They're proud of your leadership with South Carolina leading us off for the presidential primary, but they're proud of what you're doing to build the state, to build state legislature, to build the state Senate, to win congressional seats. And I am just so honored that you would have me here, and so honored to be here to support you and to continue to support you. And we need to continue to support our state parties across the country. And one point about that, you know, it shouldn't take a Barack Obama to keep winning presidencies. The other side, you ever notice that they pick the most mediocre person? I still remember when I was in school, George W. Bush came and he bragged about making all C's. You know, we got to we run someone who's got like straight A's, Harvard Law Review. You know, they can 4 divorces, doesn't matter. You got the picture perfect family. You know, the reason they do that is because they've got infrastructure. And we don't have infrastructure. Crystal believes in infrastructure. We've got to help her build the infrastructure here. And we can win down here. I do have to give a shout out, and then I'll get to my remarks to Mr. Clyburn, Jim Clyburn. And I say I was honored to give one of his nominating speeches when he was for him to become the assistant majority leader this time. And I said, there's a lot of talk about generational change in our caucus, and I'm all for generational change, and Hakeem is doing an exceptional job. But some of us in this caucus wouldn't be in America if it weren't for Jim Clyburn. Some of us wouldn't be in America, including me. You see, my grandfather spent 4 years in jail alongside Gandhi fighting for Indian independence in the 1940s. And Reverend Lawson went down to India. Dr. King famously said, I go to other countries as a tourist, I come to India as a pilgrim, and was influenced by Satyagraha, Truth Force, to have the civil rights movement in this country. It was a civil rights movement in the United States of America that led to the 1965 Immigration Reform Act, so that my parents could come to the United States of America. Because before 65, if you were Indian, if you were Asian, you couldn't come to America. 1923, the Bhagat Singh Thin case, when an Indian tried to get citizenship, they said the Indian was actually less appropriately qualified for citizenship than a Black American. 1923. So you see, if Jim Clyburn and people in his generation had not gone to jail, had not marched for civil rights, had not sacrificed more than any community has sacrificed for in America, my parents would not have been allowed to be in the United States of America. So I said very clearly, I will be for Jim Clyburn, for whatever he runs for whatever he runs, as long as he runs. That's my view on Mr. Clyburn. But some people conveniently forget history. You know, now that some of the Indian American communities have been doing well in Silicon Valley, and your former governor is out there running for president, I said, does she not remember the debt that the community owes to the civil rights movement? Her parents weren't different than mine. They wouldn't have been able to come to America either if it weren't for the Immigration Reform Act. And then, you know, you look at why there's so many Indian faculty at HBCUs. You ever wondered why? because they didn't get hired at Stanford, at Harvard, at MIT. That's why their first jobs were at HBCU. So people say, well, why are you now working on trying to bring technology and economic opportunity to HBCUs? I said, because it's the historical debt that I feel to those institutions. But it's not just about the debt to those institutions. It's about building an America where we're finally going to have every person have an equal chance, every community have an equal chance. Look at what has happened in this country. You've got $10 trillion of market value in my district. In 30 miles, Apple, Google, Intel, Yahoo, Cisco. 1/3 of the S&P 500. But look at the communities that have been excluded from the modern prosperity of the 21st century. We can't have a democracy if we have the wealth and opportunity of a modern economy in New York, LA, Silicon Valley, and the rest of America stagnating in terms of wages, in terms of economic opportunity. I wrote an op-ed with John Lewis talking about the intersection of Gandhi's movement and the civil rights movement, but Mr. Lewis had a great line at the end of it. He said, technology rights are the new civil rights. Technology rights are the new civil rights. And that's why I have done work. Jonathan and I are going to a Google workshop afterwards with 1,000 kids coming to get basic training in robotics. Man, that sounds exciting, but these are the opportunities that are going to get jobs, that are going to pay a wage where you can actually afford to have a house in the American dream. This is why we set up the partnership of Google and Benedict College, where folks come in, they get a $5,000 scholarship and a $65,000 job after they're done. Why we set up a partnership with Zoom and Claflin. We should be having a goal in this country to have 1 million Black technology jobs with every tech company partnering with every HBCU and HSI institution in America. You don't even need the government to be able to do it. You really don't. You need to go to these tech CEOs and you say, you want talent, you want to invest in America, you want to compete with 1 billion people in China, start to expand your horizon. You know, I taught at Stanford. I said, at Stanford, my students got funded before they had an idea. They got funded before they had an idea. Only 1% of venture capital goes to Black entrepreneurs. We need to talk about wealth generation if we're going to overcome the racial wealth gap. The Black community was left out of the agricultural revolution. They were left out of the industrial revolution. Shame on us if we're going to have the Black community left out of the technology revolution. And we can do it. They say we have this opportunity to rebuild our economy. I was in Florence in an electric vehicle battery plant coming to Florence. Oh, why don't we look at this opportunity as we're going to have a new climate future to build new economic jobs and prosperity in every district in this country? That's what Joe Biden is doing. That's what he's doing. He's just got to get a little bit better at bragging about it. That's the only thing he's got to do more of. Brag about what he's done. So some of us are going to brag for him because he has reversed the all outsourcing globalization debacle that was here for 40 years. And let me tell you what happened with that debacle. You know, you had first William Julius Wilson. Does anyone know William Julius Wilson here? Well, I'm going to tell you about William Julius Wilson because he's the most famous sociologist in America, African-American sociologist. I had him when I was in school, and I didn't have him for class, but he was there. And he was writing about how manufacturing was leaving the South, manufacturing was leaving big cities, and basically that the Black working class was falling behind and losing the American dream because we were offshoring all of our manufacturing jobs. And he said that people were feeling death and despair, and it was leading to the breakdown of families, and no one paid attention. Then you know what happened? This started to happen to the white community. And suddenly everyone said, You know what? Maybe we ought to start paying attention. William Joseph Wilson was talking about it 20 years before. But you know what? Now it started to happen in not just Dayton and Cleveland and Milwaukee and Philadelphia. It started to happen in the Rust Belt. Manufacturing left. Dayton and Case come around and they're talking about debts of despair in white working class families. How did we let this happen? Wealth to accumulate in districts like mine with more millionaires and billionaires than ever before, and the rest of the country in both white and black communities and Latino communities losing economic opportunity, losing industry. We went from the largest exporter of steel in America to the largest importer of steel. 9 out of 15 steel companies in China. 9 out of the top 15 steel companies in China. We didn't, in the pandemic, we didn't make Tylenol here. We didn't make baby formula here. We didn't make masks here. Joe Biden is saying, I'm going to reverse that. I'm going to bring that manufacturing back home. I'm going to bring the new industries back home. Why can't we build the new steel plants here in deindustrialized places and it'd be 1/3 of the carbon footprint? That's Joe Biden's vision, to bring that new industry, new manufacturing and jobs here. But we need, you know, one of the reasons he needs 4 more years, because if we have Trump basically, in it because that's what it is. All this other stuff is it's a formality. And that's the reality. It's going to be Donald Trump on that side. And if he gets back in, I've got to tell you something, the infrastructure bill that Joe Biden passed, the IRA that Joe Biden passed, the CHIPS Act that I helped write and that Joe Biden passed, that money is not going to come to black contractors or brown communities. You think Donald Trump's administration is going to administer that money in a way that's going to help communities here in South Carolina? No way. No way. There is the challenge for the next term for the president and for all of us is to make sure that the legislation we pass, that we have enough black and brown and small businesses and communities that need it getting that funding, that it's actually going to communities that have been left out. Donald Trump was going to erase all of that. For all of Donald Trump's talk about, I'm going to rebuild America, I'm going to rebuild the middle of the country, I'm going to rebuild manufacturing. He got in there and all he was Ronald Reagan and George Bush combined with blatant racism. But the policy was the same. Policy was the same. Tax cuts for the wealthy. Tax cuts that benefited the coast. They benefited New York and Silicon Valley. The billionaires, millionaires in my district, they said, fine, thank you very much, Donald Trump. You think he put a single steel plant in this country? A single aluminum plant in this country? The trade deficit with China went up. And that's what he's going to do if he gets back. He's going to take the hard-earned progress that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have been making in building this industrial base in this country and trying to give people a shot. And he's going to take that, reverse that and give that back in tax cuts. And let me tell you, there's all this talk about the deficits. There are 3 causes of the deficit. 4. Reagan's tax cuts, Bush's tax cuts, Trump's tax cuts. $10 trillion of the deficit right there. And you add in George Bush's 2 wars, and that explains the deficits. The Republicans have caused the deficits, not the Democrats. We are the ones, this president's cleaning it up. And he wants to tax the people who've done extraordinarily well. He wants to tax them. I don't understand for the life of me. I really don't get it. There's an honest question to folks. How is it a hard vote when the guy who has more millionaires and billionaires in his district, which is me, is saying tax them higher, and they keep sending me back to Congress? How is this a hard vote for anyone else in Congress? I'm telling people, tax my district. Tax my district. That's what the president wants to do, so we can have the jobs across this country, so we can have health insurance for everyone. Look, I'm for Medicare for all. People say, why are you for Medicare for all? I was talking to a pastor last night. I won't tell his name because he may not want to share the story. He said, I have knee problems. I go to the doctor. You know what the first thing they ask him? Not what knee, not how you doing. Where's your insurance? I mean, come on. You go into your feelings. You do this in any other country. Visit Europe. They don't ask you for your papers. They ask you how you're doing. How can we help you? Even if you're an immigrant to that country. We need in America healthcare from the day you're born. Every other democracy has it. And we can afford it in the United States of America. We can afford in the United States of America to say that you should not go into thousands of dollars of debt just to get an education. I had $100,000 of debt after I left school. I've done well. I went to Silicon Valley, but I had the debt, you know? And I remember in my 20s what it was like having a forbearance, not being able to pay it. Black women have $38,000 of debt, more than any other demographic. 12 years after they graduate, they're paying, their debt is higher than when they graduated college. How can you overcome the 10-to-1 racial wealth gap? How can someone buy a house? We need to make public college in this country free, and we need to eliminate the student loans. That's not asking for a lot. You don't have that kind of debt in any other country in the world. And childcare. Look at childcare. The cost of childcare, $10,000 a year on average. People tell me they tell me that a lot of times they do the math, and it costs more to work than the work pays. I mean, you know what I'm talking about. You add it up one day, the childcare, the gas cost to get to work, the cost of eating out because you can't prepare the meals. I'm for working on a bill, which if Joe Biden wins, we can work to get universal childcare. Childcare should be $10 a day, $10 a day. That's still $300 a month, $3,300 a year. I don't understand it. How we have a system where childcare costs an arm and a leg, and then we can't even pay our childcare workers fairly. It's like broken on both sides. How would you not want people paid fairly who are dealing with your kids? But at the ages of 1, 2, 3, 4, that should be the highest paid invested work. That's what's going to determine our country's future economically. And there we're paying almost $1 trillion on a defense budget. And we can't fund our HBCUs. Have you ever thought of this? I mean, the HBCU that produces Martin Luther King, you know, one of the great treasures for America, has got an endowment of about 500 million. And Harvard's got an endowment of 50 billion, 100 to 1. And you wonder why we have a racial wealth gap in this country? Why can't we put $10 billion into the endowments of HBCUs? That's what Jim Clyburn wants to do. That would be 1% of our defense budget. It would be 20% of the funding that I'm going to support to Ukraine to transform HBCUs across America. We've got to get serious about the types of investment in health, in education, in childcare that are going to give people a real shot. The Republicans keep talking about the cost of living. Yeah, the cost of living is high. What are you doing about it? You know what's high? It's childcare costs, it's healthcare costs, it's student loan costs. Those are the costs that are high. It's housing costs. And we got a policy where we're allowing Wall Street to go buy up housing in homes for the working class. That's got to stop. We can't be subsidizing Wall Street to buying up properties here in the United States. And we should be providing people with the home ownership opportunities. Home ownership in the Black community, 42%. Compared to 62% in the white community. And that's the way most people build wealth. We got to get serious. And on rent, cap rent, not beyond inflation. You want to get serious about the affordability crisis, start to have a policy about housing, about education, about childcare, about healthcare. And that's what this president is going to do. And those of us who are a little progressive will push him to do it. But first, we got to get him to win. We got to get him to win. I don't understand the sentiment of People who say, well, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You know, I'll end with these points, and then I want to open it up for questions for either Jonathan or me. I had an 18-year-old whose mom, and usually a diplomatic guy, Jonathan knows this. I had an 18-year-old come to one of my town halls when Donald Trump won. And her mom, his mom, stood up and said, Ro, Donald Trump has won. My 18-year-old says, I don't want to do anything in politics. Convince him why he should, given what's happened in our country. I said, ma'am, I respect you, but your son has not earned the right for cynicism. See, my grandfather spent 15 years in jail and out of jail fighting for Indian independence. John Lewis was beaten on the Edmund Pettus Bridge so that people could stand in the United States Congress. There are too many people in this country who have sacrificed too much for us to say that we're going to give up because a billionaire buffoon is somehow going to end American democracy. I don't believe it. We're much stronger than that as a nation. We're doing something impossible. We're trying to become the first multiracial, multi-ethnic democracy in human history. Someone said to me, Ro, how can you, what about all the squad? I said, isn't it brilliant that you can have in the United States Congress descendants of Holocaust survivors and people who have family in Gaza in the halls of Congress? Isn't that a beautiful thing? If we can't talk to each other here, what's the hope in the Middle East? When I was growing up, my parents couldn't meet a staffer to a member of Congress. Today, there are 5 South Asians in Congress. You see, if you want to be inspired about where this country is going, it's not just the 2 people running for president. Come look at Jonathan Jackson's freshman class. Come look at the people who this country is electing, people like Jonathan, Delia Ramirez, Jasmine Crockett, Maxwell Frost. Diversity is oozing out of every border of this country, and no one can stop it. No one can stop it. The greatest speech in American history, in my view, is not Lincoln's second memorial. It's not Lincoln's Gettysburg Address. It's not even Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech. It's Frederick Douglass in 1869. Frederick Douglass in 1869. They don't teach this. They should. They don't want to teach anything these days. Moms for Liberty. I don't want to teach history. Moms against liberty. Yeah, seriously. I say, really, that's your vision of American exceptionalism? That you don't want people to understand what we are, what we've overcome? Why wouldn't you want to teach what we've overcome, what we're becoming? But if they learned history, if they actually read what Frederick Douglass said in 1869, think about this for a second. Frederick Douglass spent 20 years enslaved. 20 years enslaved, and he finally becomes a free man. And you would think the first people he would speak out for would be for other people who were enslaved, would be Black Americans. But that's not what Douglass does. In 1869, Douglass speaks out for Chinese immigrants. He says, in the free air of America, we need to welcome people from China, from other parts of the world, because they will add to the American culture, not subtract from it. And people say, well, they may not be part of the church, Mr. Douglass. And Mr. Douglass says the church will thrive. It doesn't matter if there are other people from other faiths coming. That will only make the church stronger in its convictions as they have to grapple with ideas and faiths different from their own. But that we will become a universal nation, a nation of all nations, a composite nation that will be the true first multiracial, multi-ethnic democracy in the world. That was Frederick Douglass in 1869. Someone enslaved for 20 years who had the vision of seeing what America could be. My friends, we are so close to building that vision. We beat Trump, we beat the forces of darkness by seeing the forces of what is at America's core, to be this multi-ethnic, multi-racial democracy with the streams of history and struggle from every part of the world coalescing here in the United States in a coalition with young people that are going to see that vision through. That is what is at stake in this election. Joe Biden believes in the Douglas vision of a composite nation. He may not get every word right. He may not get every policy right, but that's the direction he wants to go. Donald Trump is representing people who were scared when Barack Obama won. That's the simple choice. That's really the choice. Do you want to become the country of a multiracial democracy? I believe at my core we do. I believe we can. I believe that is what all the sacrifice has been for. And I believe when we win in 2024, when we defeat Trumpism, we would have taken the decisive step to becoming the nation that Douglas envisioned. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.